I, 27 feuds, am grappling with what feels like the biggest dilemma of my life. To understand my situation, you need to know a bit about my background. Growing up, my family was always on the move due to my father's job. My brother and I constantly struggled with finding new friends, adjusting to new schools, and being uprooted just when we'd start to feel settled. When I was in my early teens, I was 12 and my brother was 13. We finally settled in what my parents called our forever home. In this new town, we quickly realized that our neighbors had a son about the same age as my brother. They ended up in the same class at school, and before long, they became inseparable. To put it simply, this neighbor's son became the brother my brother never had. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a bit jealous of their relationship. My bond with my brother had always been unshakable, but seeing him form such a close friendship with someone else stirred up complicated emotions. Still, I was quite the tomboy back then, so I managed to find my own place in their dynamic, and things were good for a while. Then, tragedy struck. My brother was diagnosed with kidney cancer, and he passed away painfully just a few months later. Our family was torn apart, devastated beyond words. The loss of my brother left a gaping hole in our lives that seemed impossible to fill. Fortunately, or perhaps unfortunately, as I've come to see it, for my parents, our neighbor's son stepped up to fill the role of an entire support system. He was always there, offering whatever help and emotional support my parents might need. He'd come over at a moment's notice, offering to help with practically anything around the house or outside of it. It wasn't that he was trying to replace my brother, but rather to ease our struggle in coping with his absence. His actions were incredibly sweet, and probably the most thoughtful thing anyone could have done for our little family. The following year was his last year of high school, and like everyone else, he was running around trying desperately to save money and get into a good university. Just before summer began, our neighbor's son came over to tell my parents that he'd been accepted into one of the most prestigious universities in the country. The fact that he'd managed to get in was impressive in itself. My parents were overjoyed for him, finding grace in their hearts to express all the emotions that had been overwhelming them when they realized how things had changed. Our neighbor's son applying and getting into college, going through the process with him that they had always imagined doing with their son, who was now gone. In that rush of emotion and joy, my parents made a decision that would change everything. They told our neighbor's son that they would fully fund his education. They had been saving for both my brother's and my college funds since we were born, and when he told them how much he would need to pay, they hesitated only slightly before saying it was well within their means. I was furious, devastated, betrayed. How could they do this? What about me? When I confronted them, their response was dismissive. "You can work part-time to pay for your education," they said. "You're smart and capable. You'll figure it out." Their words cut deep. It felt like they were choosing this boy over their own daughter. Like I didn't matter as much. Like my future wasn't as important as fulfilling some misplaced sense of obligation to my brother's memory. The next few years were hell for me. I was determined to become a doctor, but without financial support from my parents, I had to work multiple jobs while studying. I barely slept, constantly stressed about making ends meet and maintaining my grades. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, feeling abandoned by the very people who were supposed to support me unconditionally. Despite the challenges, I managed to get through medical school. It was a grueling journey, filled with sacrifices and hardships that I believe I shouldn't have had to face. But I did it. I became the doctor I had always dreamed of being. Now, years later, I'm doing well financially. I have a stable job, a loving husband, and a life that many would envy. But my relationship with my parents remains strained. They act as if what happened is in the past, and shouldn't matter anymore. But for me, it's not that simple. The other day, I received a letter from our neighbor's son. He said he has many emotions and things he'd like to express to me and wants to meet to discuss them as soon as possible. I'm conflicted about this. On one hand, I know it's not his fault. He didn't ask for my parents to give him my college fund. But on the other hand, the thought of meeting him brings back all the pain and resentment I've been trying to move past. I've built my life on my own terms, achieved success through my own hard work, but I can't seem to reconcile with my family. Am I the asshole for not being able to forgive my parents, for holding on to this grudge, for hesitating to meet with our neighbor's son? I need advice. How do I move forward from this? How do I deal with these lingering feelings of betrayal and resentment? Is it wrong of me to still feel this way after all these years? My husband thinks I should meet with our neighbor's son, that it might bring some closure. But I'm afraid it will just open old wounds. And as for my parents, they keep reaching out, wanting to be a part of my life again. But every time I consider letting them back in, I remember the struggle I went through. The nights I went to bed hungry because I couldn't afford both food and textbooks. The times I nearly gave up on my dreams because the path seemed impossible. I know holding on to anger isn't healthy, but I can't seem to let it go. The injustice of it all still burns inside me. Am I being unreasonable? Should I just forgive and forget? Or am I justified in keeping my distance? I'm torn between my desire for family and my need to protect myself from further hurt. It's a constant battle between longing for reconciliation and fearing disappointment. Every family gathering I miss, every holiday spent alone, is a reminder of what I've lost. But it's also a reminder of my strength, of how far I've come on my own. There's also the issue of my future children to consider. If I have kids someday, will I be depriving them of grandparents because of my inability to forgive? Am I perpetuating a cycle of family estrangement? These thoughts keep me up at night. I've tried therapy, but it's been a slow process. My therapist says I need to confront these feelings head-on, but I'm scared. Scared of the emotions it might unleash. Scared of being vulnerable again. And now, with this letter from our neighbor's son, I feel like I'm being forced to face everything I've been avoiding. What if he wants to apologize? What if he wants to pay back the money? Would that even make a difference after all this time? I'm also grappling with the societal pressure to forgive family no matter what. Everyone always says blood is thicker than water. But what about when that blood has caused you so much pain? Is there a statute of limitations on family betrayal? There's also the guilt. Guilt for being angry. Guilt for not being able to move on. Guilt for potentially denying my parents a relationship with their only living child. It's a heavy burden to carry. I find myself wondering about our neighbor's son too. Did he have any idea about where his college fund came from? Does he feel guilty? Has he had a good life? Part of me hopes he has, that at least some good came out of my pain. But another part of me, a part I'm not proud of, hopes he's struggled too. Is that terrible of me? I'm also struggling with the impact this has had on my marriage. My husband is incredibly supportive, but I know my issues with my family affect him too. He wants us to have a big, happy family, but my trauma makes that difficult. I'm afraid my inability to forgive might eventually drive a wedge between us. There's also the matter of my career. I became a doctor, partly to prove to my parents that I could do it without their help. But now I wonder if I chose this path for the right reasons. Do I truly love being a doctor, or was it just a way to prove my worth? These doubts creep in during my darkest moments. I've thought about reaching out to my parents, about taking that first step towards reconciliation. But every time I pick up the phone, I freeze. The fear of being hurt again paralyzes me. Is it weak to protect myself? Or would it be stronger to risk being vulnerable again? I'm also aware that time is passing. My parents are getting older. What if something happens to them before I can resolve this? The thought of living with that regret terrifies me. But so does the thought of letting them back into my life, only to be disappointed again. And now, with this letter, I feel like I'm at a crossroads. Do I meet with our neighbor's son and potentially reopen this whole can of worms? Or do I continue to try to move on with my life, leaving the past in the past? I know I need to make a decision. I can't keep living in this limbo, torn between the past and the future. But every option seems fraught with potential pain and consequences. So Reddit, what do you think? Am I the asshole for not being able to forgive my parents, for hesitating to meet with our neighbor's son? How do I move forward from here? Any advice would be greatly appreciated. I feel lost and could really use some outside perspectives on this situation. I've been sitting here, staring at this letter for hours, my mind racing with all the possible outcomes of meeting our neighbor's son. Part of me wants to know what he has to say, but another part is terrified of stirring up old feelings I've worked so hard to bury. My husband gently placed his hand on my shoulder, startling me out of my thoughts. "You don't have to decide right now," he said softly. "Take your time. Whatever you choose, I'm here for you." His support means the world to me, but it also highlights the stark contrast between his family and mine. His parents have been nothing but loving and supportive since the day we met. They've never pressed me about my family situation, respecting my boundaries even when I know they're curious. It's a bittersweet reminder of what I've missed out on with my own parents. As I mulled over my decision, I couldn't help but think about the broader implications of family obligations and forgiveness. Is there a point where the damage done is too great to repair? Are we obligated to maintain family relationships even when they're toxic or harmful? These questions led me down a rabbit hole of ethical and moral dilemmas. As a doctor, I've seen families torn apart by medical decisions, inheritance disputes, and long-held grudges. I've watched patients reconcile on their deathbeds and others die alone, estranged from their loved ones. It's made me acutely aware of the fragility of life and relationships, but it's also shown me the incredible resilience of the human spirit. I've seen people forgive the unforgivable, rebuild relationships from ashes, and find peace in the most unlikely places. Could I be one of those people? Do I even want to be? The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about me and my parents anymore. It was about the kind of person I want to be, the kind of life I want to lead. Do I want to be someone who can forgive, who can rise above past hurts? Or am I justified in protecting myself, in holding on to my anger as a shield against future pain? As I wrestled with these questions, I found myself thinking about my patients. I remembered a young woman, not much younger than me, who came in for a routine checkup. During our conversation, she mentioned that she hadn't spoken to her parents in years due to a falling out. She seemed sad about it, but resigned. A few months later, she was diagnosed with a serious illness. The first thing she did was reach out to her estranged parents. They reconciled, and her parents became her biggest support system during her treatment. Watching their relationship heal alongside her physical recovery was incredibly moving. But for every story like that, there was another of toxic family dynamics causing real harm. I thought about the elderly patient who was being emotionally abused by his adult children, yet refused to cut ties because family is family. It took a lot of counseling and support for him to set boundaries and prioritize his own well-being. These experiences have shaped my perspective on family and forgiveness, but they've also complicated it. There's no one-size-fits-all answer, no clear right or wrong path. As I sat there, letter in hand, I realized that whatever decision I made would be a defining moment. It would set the tone for my future relationships, not just with my parents and our neighbor's son, but with everyone in my life. If I chose to meet with him, to potentially open the door to reconciliation. What would that mean? Could I handle the emotional toll? Was I strong enough to face the past head on? On the other hand, if I decided not to meet him, to continue keeping my distance from my past, what would that say about me? Would I be protecting myself or just avoiding growth? The weight of the decision felt overwhelming. I found myself wishing for a simple solution, a clear sign pointing me in the right direction. But life rarely offers such clarity, especially when it comes to matters of the heart. I looked at my husband, who had been patiently sitting with me in silence. "What would you do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He took a moment before responding, choosing his words carefully. "I can't make this decision for you," he said. "But I think you'll regret it if you don't at least hear what he has to say. You don't have to forgive anyone or make any big decisions. Just listen. You can always walk away if it becomes too much." His words resonated with me. Maybe he was right. Maybe taking this small step, just listening, could be a way to start processing everything without committing to anything more. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and typed out a response to our neighbor's son. I agreed to meet him at a local coffee shop in a few days. As I hit send, I felt a mix of anxiety and relief wash over me. Whatever happens at this meeting, I told myself, I'm strong enough to handle it. I've been through worse. I've built a life for myself from nothing. I can face this too. As the day of the meeting approached, I found myself oscillating between nervous anticipation and a strange sense of calm. I reminded myself that I was in control. I could leave at any time. I didn't owe anyone anything. The night before the meeting, I had a vivid dream about my brother. We were kids again, playing in our backyard. He turned to me with that mischievous grin I remembered so well and said, "It's okay to let go, sis. You're stronger than you know." I woke up with tears in my eyes, but feeling oddly at peace. Whether it was my subconscious trying to tell me something or just a manifestation of my stress, it felt like a sign. Maybe it was time to at least try to move forward. As I got ready to leave for the coffee shop, my husband gave me a tight hug. "Remember," he said, "you've already won. You've built an amazing life. Nothing that happens today can take that away from you." With those words echoing in my mind, I stepped out into the crisp morning air, ready to face whatever came next. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to embrace that uncertainty. As I walked to my car, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. The woman staring back at me wasn't the scared, betrayed girl from years ago. She was strong, successful, loved. Whatever happened at this meeting, I knew I could handle it. With a deep breath, I got into my car and started the engine. It was time to face the past and, hopefully, find a way to move towards a future where the weight of old hurts didn't feel so heavy. As I pulled out of the driveway, I allowed myself to feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the first step towards healing. Update 1. 2 weeks have passed since my initial post. Thank you all for your support and advice. It's been a whirlwind of emotions, and I'm still processing everything that's happened. I met with our neighbor's son as planned. The moment I saw him sitting in the coffee shop, a flood of memories and emotions washed over me. He looked older, of course, but there was still something of the boy I remembered in his features. As I approached the table, he stood up, his face a mixture of nervousness and what I can only describe as deep remorse. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice slightly shaky. I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time." We sat down, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was heavy with unspoken words and years of separation. Finally, he took a deep breath and began to speak. "I need you to know," he started, "that I've carried a tremendous guilt all these years. My career, my life, it feels like it doesn't truly belong to me. Like I robbed you of an opportunity that I could never have provided for myself." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't expected this level of awareness or remorse from him. He continued, explaining that he had been informed by his parents the year after he started university that I had dropped out. He had assumed it was due to financial difficulties, and the realization of what he had inadvertently cost me had been eating away at him ever since. "I want to pay you back," he said, his eyes filled with unshed tears. "All the money your parents paid for my education, it's yours. It always should have been yours. I know it won't make up for lost time or opportunities, but it's the least I can do." I sat there, my heart aching and my mind in turmoil. Here was this successful man, tearing himself apart over something that wasn't really his fault. He hadn't asked for my parents to fund his education. He hadn't known the consequences it would have for me. "It's not your fault," I found myself saying, my voice surprisingly steady. "You didn't know. You didn't ask for this." He shook his head vehemently. "But I benefited from it. I should have asked more questions, should have insisted on knowing where the money came from. I was just so grateful, so caught up in the opportunity. I didn't think about the consequences." We talked for hours. He told me about his life, his career as a pilot, the constant feeling that his success was built on my sacrifice. I shared some of my struggles, the hardships I faced putting myself through medical school. As we talked, I felt something shift inside me. The anger and resentment I had been carrying for so long began to feel different. Not gone, certainly, but somehow less sharp, less all-consuming. I didn't accept his offer of money. It didn't feel right, somehow. The damage done wasn't really about the money anymore. It was about the betrayal, the feeling of being valued less than someone else by my own parents. After our meeting, I felt emotionally drained, but also lighter, in a way I hadn't expected. It was as if facing this part of my past head-on had released some of the tension I'd been carrying for years. Encouraged by this experience, I decided to have a real, honest conversation with my parents. It wasn't easy. Years of pent-up emotions came pouring out. I told them how hurt I had been, how their decision had made me feel unloved and unvalued. To my surprise, they listened. Really listened, perhaps for the first time. My mother cried. My father looked more vulnerable than I had ever seen him. They didn't make excuses, but they did try to explain their mindset at the time. "We were drowning in grief," my mother said, her voice choked with emotion. "When we looked at him, we saw a piece of your brother. It felt like a way to honor his memory, to give the opportunities he would never have to someone he cared about. We know now that it was wrong," my father added. "We should never have put that burden on you. We were so lost in our own pain that we couldn't see how much we were hurting you." Their words didn't magically fix everything, but they were a start. For the first time, I felt like they were truly trying to understand my perspective. As I left their house that day, I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't quite name. Relief, sadness, a tentative hope, and underneath it all, a lingering anger that I wasn't quite ready to let go of. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting deeply on forgiveness, family, and the long-lasting impacts of our choices. I thought about the patients I've seen, the families torn apart by misunderstandings and mistakes. I thought about my own future, the family I hope to have someday. I realized that forgiveness isn't a single act, but a process. It's not about forgetting or excusing what happened, but about choosing to move forward, to not let the past dictate my future. I'm not there yet. The hurt is still too raw, the memories too painful. But I think I might be ready to start trying. I've decided to start seeing a therapist again, to work through these complex emotions. My husband has been incredibly supportive, giving me space when I need it, and a shoulder to cry on when it all becomes too much. I'm also considering reaching out to our neighbor's son again, not to accept his money, but to perhaps build some kind of relationship. He's not responsible for my parents' choices, and I think letting go of any resentment towards him might be a good first step. As for my parents, it's complicated. We're talking more now, but there's still a distance between us. I'm not sure if we'll ever have the close relationship I once dreamed of, but I'm trying to be open to the possibility of some kind of reconciliation. It's a day-by-day process. Some days I feel optimistic, ready to move forward. Other days, the old anger and hurt come rushing back, and it's all I can do to not shut everyone out again. But I'm trying, and for now, that has to be enough. I want to thank everyone who responded to my original post. Your perspectives and advice helped me find the courage to take these first steps. I know I have a long journey ahead of me, but for the first time in years, I feel like I'm moving in the right direction. I'll keep you updated as things progress. Thank you all again for your support and understanding. It means more than you know. Update 2. It's been about 3 months since my last update, and a lot has changed. I'm still processing everything, but I felt the need to share with you all. First and foremost, I'm pregnant. It wasn't planned, but my husband and I are thrilled. However, this unexpected blessing has brought a whole new set of complications to my family situation. The news of my pregnancy has stirred up a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, I'm excited to start this new chapter of my life. On the other, I'm terrified of repeating the mistakes of the past. Will I be a good mother? Can I provide the unconditional love and support that I felt I didn't receive? My husband has been my rock through all of this. He's so excited about becoming a father, and his enthusiasm is infectious. But late at night, when the house is quiet and my thoughts are loud, I find myself worrying. What if I can't protect our child from the kind of pain I experienced? What if my unresolved issues with my parents somehow affect my ability to be a good mother? Speaking of my parents, things have been complicated. When I told them about the pregnancy, their reaction was a mix of joy and hesitation. I could see they were thrilled at the prospect of becoming grandparents, but there was also a sadness in their eyes. I think they realized how much they've missed out on in my life, and how much their past actions might impact their relationship with their grandchild. We've been trying to work on our relationship. I've been seeing my therapist regularly, and we've had a few family sessions together. It's been challenging, to say the least. Old hurts keep resurfacing, and there are moments when I want to just give up and cut ties completely. But then I think about my unborn child, and I find the strength to keep trying. I want my child to have grandparents, to know their family history, both the good and the bad. I want them to understand where they come from, even if that story isn't always a happy one. My mother has been making efforts to be more involved in my life. She calls regularly to check on me and the baby, offers advice, sometimes wanted, sometimes not, and has even started knitting baby clothes. It's sweet, but it also brings up complicated feelings. Where was this care and attention when I needed it most? My father, on the other hand, has been more reserved. I can tell he's trying, but he struggles to express his emotions. During one particularly tense therapy session, he broke down and admitted that he's afraid of making more mistakes. Afraid of losing me completely, afraid of not being a good grandfather. It was the most vulnerable I've ever seen him, and it helped me understand him a little better. As for our neighbor's son, we've maintained contact since our meeting. He's been surprisingly supportive throughout this process. He even offered to be a character witness if I ever decided to confront my parents legally about the college fund issue, which I'm not planning to do. But the offer meant a lot. He's become something of a friend, which is a turn of events I never expected. We meet for coffee occasionally, and he's always eager to hear about my pregnancy and how things are going with my parents. It's strange, but in a way, he understands my situation better than anyone else. He's been carrying his own guilt and complicated feelings about my parents for years. The pregnancy has also brought up discussions about inheritance and family finances. My parents have hinted at wanting to set up a college fund for the baby, which brought back a flood of painful memories. I'm torn between wanting to ensure my child has every opportunity and not wanting to accept anything from my parents that might come with strings attached. My husband thinks we should accept if they offer, arguing that it's a chance for them to make amends and do right by their grandchild. But I can't help but worry. What if history repeats itself? What if they promise this money to our child and then give it away to someone else? These fears and doubts have been causing tension in my marriage. My husband is endlessly patient, but I know he's frustrated by my inability to let go of the past. We've had more arguments in the past 3 months than in our entire relationship before this. I'm trying to work through these issues in therapy, but it's a slow process. My therapist says that becoming a parent often brings up unresolved childhood issues, and that's certainly been true for me. Every decision, every plan we make for the future seems to be colored by my past experiences. Despite all this, there have been moments of joy and hope, feeling the baby kick for the first time, seeing my husband's face light up at the ultrasound, even watching my mother carefully fold tiny baby clothes. These moments remind me why I'm trying so hard to heal these old wounds. I'm not naive enough to think that having a baby will magically fix everything. I know we still have a long road ahead of us. But this child has given me a new perspective on family, on forgiveness, on the cycle of hurt and healing that seems to be part of every family story. As I approach motherhood, I find myself making silent promises to my unborn child. Promises to love unconditionally, to support without question, to be the parent I needed when I was young. And in making these promises, I'm learning to have compassion for my own parents. They made mistakes, huge ones, but I'm beginning to understand that they were doing the best they could with the emotional tools they had. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if my relationship with my parents will ever be fully healed. But I do know that I'm committed to breaking the cycle of hurt for my child. I'm committed to creating a new family story, one of love, understanding, and forgiveness. Thank you all for your continued support. Your words of encouragement and shared experiences have been a lifeline through this journey. I'll update again when the baby arrives. Until then, wish us luck. We're going to need it. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I'm writing this with my newborn daughter sleeping peacefully in her crib next to me. The past half year has been a whirlwind of emotions, challenges, and unexpected moments of joy. Our daughter, let's call her Sophie, was born 3 weeks ago. The experience of giving birth was intense, beautiful, and terrifying all at once. As I held her for the first time, I was overwhelmed by a love so fierce it took my breath away. In that moment, all the fears and doubts I'd been carrying seemed to fade into the background. I knew with absolute certainty that I would do anything to protect this tiny human. My husband has been an incredible partner through all of this. Seeing him with Sophie, the gentle way he holds her, the silly songs he sings during diaper changes, it makes me fall in love with him all over again. We're both exhausted, running on little sleep and a lot of coffee, but we're happy.
Really, truly happy.
As for my parents, well, that's been a journey in itself. They were at the hospital when Sophie was born, waiting anxiously in the family room. When my husband brought them in to meet their granddaughter for the first time, I saw something in their eyes I hadn't seen in years, pure, unadulterated joy. My mother burst into tears, carefully cradling Sophie as if she was the most precious thing in the world. And my father, my stoic, reserved father, had tears in his eyes as he gently stroked Sophie's tiny hand with his finger. In that moment, something shifted. It wasn't a magical fix for all our problems, but it was a new beginning. Seeing them with Sophie, I realized that they truly did love me, even if they hadn't always shown it in the best ways. They were determined to be better grandparents than they had been parents. Over the past few weeks, they've been incredibly supportive. My mother has been coming over almost every day, cooking meals, helping with laundry, and giving us a chance to catch a few hours of sleep. My father, who I've never seen so much as heat up a TV dinner, has been learning to change diapers and warm bottles. We've had some deep conversations during these late-night feeding sessions. They've opened up about their own upbringings, the pressures they felt as parents, and the regrets they carry. I've shared more about my struggles, my feelings of abandonment and betrayal. It's been painful at times, but also cathartic. I won't say I've completely forgiven them. The hurt they caused runs deep, and it's not something that can be erased overnight. But I'm learning to separate the parents they were then from the grandparents they are now. I'm giving them the chance to prove themselves, to be the supportive family I always needed. As for our neighbor's son, he's become an unexpected source of support. He visited us in the hospital and has dropped by a few times since we've been home. He's wonderful with Sophie, and it's clear he's determined to be a positive presence in her life. We've talked about setting up a small trust fund for Sophie's education, something he insisted on contributing to. It feels like a way of coming full circle, of turning a painful past into something positive for the future. My relationship with my husband has grown stronger through all of this. We've had our moments of stress and disagreement, especially in those first sleepless weeks, but we've learned to communicate better, to lean on each other when things get tough. Watching him with Sophie, I'm reminded every day of why I fell in love with him. Becoming a mother has changed me in ways I never expected. I find myself more patient, more understanding, not just with Sophie, but with everyone around me. I look at my parents, and I see not just the mistakes they made, but the love they have for me and for Sophie. I see their efforts to make amends, to be better. I've realized that forgiveness isn't about forgetting the past or pretending it didn't happen. It's about choosing to move forward, to not let past hurts dictate our future. It's a daily choice, and some days are harder than others, but for Sophie's sake, and for my own, I'm committed to making that choice. Looking to the future, I know we still have challenges ahead. There will be disagreements about parenting styles, boundaries to be set and respected. The old hurts might resurface from time to time, but I'm hopeful. For the first time in years, I'm truly hopeful about my family's future. I've learned that family is complicated. It's messy and imperfect, but it's also resilient. With love, effort, and a willingness to grow and change, even the deepest wounds can begin to heal. As I look at Sophie, peacefully sleeping, I make a promise to love her unconditionally, to support her dreams, to be the parent she needs me to be. And in making that promise, I find the strength to keep working on my relationship with my own parents, to keep moving forward. Thank you all for being part of this journey with me. Your support, advice, and shared experiences have been invaluable. Life isn't perfect, but it's beautiful in its imperfection. Here's to new beginnings, to second chances, and to the family we choose to be.